So how did a mailbox, yes, a literal mailbox, take down the most powerful couple in Hawaii? Now this story starts with this woman, Catherine. And Catherine's about 33 when all this begins, and she's living in Hawaii. And Catherine, she's a high-profile prosecuting attorney for the city of Honolulu. But she has a big problem. She's apparently living way beyond her means, spending more than she and her husband are bringing in, and now they're in a lot of debt. So she needs to figure out how to make more money fast to keep up this luxury lifestyle. And one day in 2004, she figures it out. Because she gets news that a friend of hers has unfortunately passed away. And this friend leaves Catherine as the sole trustee of his estate, and he gives her specific instructions to use the money that he's leaving to help raise his 2 children that he's left behind. But I guess Catherine is like, "F them kids," and she decides she's gonna steal that inheritance money from them. So she starts gaining their trust by buying them stuff, new clothes and school supplies, and she takes them out to dinner. But all the while, behind their back, she's stealing the money that they're supposed to get, which is roughly $170,000. And that's a lot of money, but it's not enough for Catherine. She wants more. And in 2007, she sees an opportunity to get more, because that is when her uncle approaches her and asks her if she can help him invest his savings of about $70,000. And Catherine's like, "Sure, I'll help your money grow." So he gives her the $70,000, and she just takes it, and she doesn't invest it at all. She keeps it for herself. And Uncle, he doesn't know. He thinks that the money's invested. So by 2009, he wants to buy a condo, but he can't get approved for a mortgage. And again, he turns to Catherine for help. Now, around the same time, Catherine's grandmother gets involved, because she wants to assist Uncle in getting a condo. And old Catherine, she sees this as a way to rip the both of them off. So she comes up with this elaborate plan where she'll have Grandma take out a reverse mortgage on her own home and help Uncle get a condo. And I'll skip the specifics of the scam, but she steals about $150,000 from the both of them without either of them knowing. Now, what makes this whole scam even crazier is that Catherine's husband gets involved in her schemes. Her husband is this guy, Lewis. And Lewis is actually a police captain. And together, they take all this money that she's been stealing and they spend it on themselves. They're like shopping and traveling around and eating at nice restaurants, and they're taking trips to Disneyland. They're going to an Elton John concert. They're paying off their own mortgage. They each get a new car, and she gets a Maserati, and he gets a Mercedes. And to make it worse, around this time, Lewis gets promoted at work. He becomes the chief of police of the Honolulu Police Department, which is why people start referring to them as the most powerful couple in Hawaii. So anyway, the chief of police is now helping his wife steal all this money. Now, while he's doing that, one day that same year, Catherine is at some community leadership event, and there she meets a high-ranking firefighter. And she thinks this firefighter is fine, and he's really into her as well. So they start talking, and they hit it off, and eventually they start smashing. So now Catherine is secretly cheating on her husband with this guy. Not only that, but she starts spending a lot of that stolen money on this firefighter. On like flights to go see him because he lives on a different island in Hawaii. She also pays for their hotels. She also starts making monthly payments for this guy's car loan because for some reason, I guess this high-ranking firefighter can't afford to pay for his own car. But anyway, here's where things start to fall apart for Catherine. Remember how Grandma took out a reverse mortgage on her house to help Uncle buy a condo? Well, a few years later, around 2013, without Catherine knowing, Grandma's mortgage debt gets sold to a new company. And because of that, all of Grandma's physical mail starts going directly to her house instead of going to Catherine. Once Grandma gets this mail, she can finally see the outstanding balance for her mortgage. And immediately, she knows something isn't right, because the balance on the reverse mortgage has increased by a lot. Because Catherine hadn't been making payments on Grandma's behalf like she said she would. She's just been pocketing the money all these years, which is just a really fucked up thing to do to your grandma. And so grandma is devastated, and now she has to sell off her house to settle this outstanding balance and not fall into debt? Not only that, but she also knows that she now has to file a lawsuit and sue her own granddaughter, Catherine. So both grandma and uncle file a lawsuit against Catherine for elder and financial abuse. But here's the thing. Catherine is still a high-powered attorney, and her husband is still the chief of police, and they have reputations to protect. Because if the public finds out about this, their careers could be ruined. So they come up with this devious scheme to discredit both grandma and uncle and make them look crazy. First, they steal their own mailbox. Then they report it stolen, and they blame it on uncle, because they're trying to make uncle look like a criminal and therefore an unreliable witness in court. Also, because grandma is in her 90s, they try to get her declared legally incompetent or mentally unfit. That way, her testimony against them can't be used in court. Meanwhile, Lewis uses his position as chief of the Honolulu Police Department to really go after uncle for mailbox theft. Like, police destroy evidence, and they falsify evidence, and they edit surveillance footage of the mailbox to make it look like uncle stole it. They also apparently dispatched 30 officers to follow uncle around 24/7 and basically surveil and harass him. And now, eventually, in 2014, this mailbox theft case goes to trial. And Lewis, I guess, is afraid that his made-up evidence against Uncle isn't strong enough and that Uncle is ultimately gonna be found not guilty. So he decides he wants to cause a mistrial. Once he gets up on the stand to testify, he makes sure to mention in front of the jury that Uncle has a past criminal record. And he's not supposed to mention that because it could bias the jury in this case and therefore cause a mistrial. Well, he does mention it intentionally, and the judge does declare a mistrial. But the chief of police's very obvious attempt to cause a mistrial was so blatant that Uncle's attorney starts thinking, man, this chief of police is corrupt as hell. And he feels like Uncle's civil rights are being violated by the city police. So he contacts the FBI and hands all the evidence over to them, showing that Lewis is corrupt and that he and his wife have been stealing. So now the FBI is involved, and they start investigating. And a few years later, in 2017, the FBI finally has enough evidence against them, and so, bam, Lewis is arrested. And I don't have a mugshot, but here is a picture of him in uniform. Also, bam, the feds arrest Catherine too. Here's a picture of her. And ultimately, Catherine loses her job as the city prosecutor, and she takes a plea deal, and that firefighter that she was smashing with has to come in and testify against her, which is just funny. But anyway, she gets sentenced to 13 years in prison, while Lewis also resigns, and he ends up getting sentenced to 7 years.